Okay, so basically, you're saying to start that Achilles is held back by a sense of justice. Dikaion, Greek. You'll notice in the prompt that I sent you, that link that I sent you, that this is the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It says, for all their originality, even Plato's and Aristotle's philosophies did not emerge in a vacuum. As far back in ancient Greek literature as Homer, the concept of dikaion, used to describe a just person, was important. From this emerged a general concept of dikaiosune, or justice, as a virtue that might be applied to a political society. The issue of what does and does not qualify as just could logically lead to controversy regarding the origin of justice, as well as that concerning its essence. And then they go on to talk about the sophists. But one of the things you have to keep in mind, we all have to keep in mind when we're looking at Homer, is that this is an era that's just emerging from the Dark Ages of Greece. Not a lot of philosophy going on in the Dark Ages. Not a lot of definitions of justice, at least not as refined definitions as you get later with Aristotle, for instance, or Plato. Certainly they thought about justice, or they were considering justice, because justice is an inherent human activity, a human concern. But for many of the people in Homer's time, in Mycenaean culture, justice was, to some degree, whoever had the biggest stick. They defined justice. So the definitions, it seems, in your paper that you have of saving face in front of others, holding to a standard of honor, protecting one's property, these seem to be later definitions or iterations of justice in general. So instead of considering justice in that sense, I would suggest this. Look at what actually stops Achilles from murdering Agamemnon. Because when he is faced with the obvious adikaion of Agamemnon, when he's faced with the obvious injustice of Agamemnon, his response immediately is to draw his sword and smash the guy to bits. He even says, that I could draw my sword and kill you on the spot. And that was pretty typical for these warlords who were loosely collected together in order to sack that wealthy city of Troy. The thing that holds Achilles back literally in the text is Athena. She grabs his hair, the back of his hair, and holds him back, and reins him in. And I forget what the line is exactly, but that's what prompts him to turn around and to say, why do you appear to me now? Why now? And she tells him, don't kill Agamemnon right now. Don't cause a fuss. Find some other way. And so he then finds another way, and the other way is that he swears by the staff that he will remove himself from battle. And that's what starts the whole snowball effect that then ends up in the epic that we see for the next 23 books. But it's not justice as we know it. It's not like, oh, I have this sense of justice, and that's going to stop me from killing this son of a bitch that's trying to take my girl. It's rather, he has a goddess in the poetic idiom, the goddess Athena, who comes down and has to control him. It's an important distinction because it's not Achilles controlling himself through the use of a code of conduct. See, it's a goddess reining in the uncontrollable youth, Achilles. Now think about what the goddess represents. Athena represents. She represents thought, warcraft, self-control, discipline. She represents wisdom. She represents all those qualities of human beings that allow us to survive in the world, if you will. Cleverness. But she doesn't necessarily represent justice, so far as I can tell anyway. Justice is more the realm of Zeus. Zeus who imposes justice over other people. So why does Homer have Athena holding him back rather than, say, Zeus? Of course, Zeus is a huge god, but nevertheless, Zeus being the god of justice, he doesn't hold back Achilles. Nor, for that matter, does Zeus's emissary, Hermes, hold back Achilles. Hermes is the god of the underworld, and he's the messenger of God, and he's the god who brings the cleverness of mathematics to men, structure and order and all that. But Hermes doesn't hold them back either. That's not the god that Homer chooses to hold back Achilles. It's Athena. And it's very significant in the text why that goddess. Perhaps it has to do with the youth of Achilles. Perhaps it has to do with wisdom that comes from debate. You debate with yourself and you realize, oh, that's a bad idea to kill the leader of the entire army. One way or the other, he gets controlled by a goddess rather than controlling himself. That's a very significant point. Before we consider any of this, I wanted to review one or two things about justice in the Homeric world. Like I said before, the Aristotelian definition hadn't really been officially formalized yet. It wouldn't be for several hundred more years. But the general idea of Aristotle's definition that justice is giving everyone their due was at least there tacitly in the ancient world. And here's what Alistair MacIntyre says about this idea of justice in the Homeric world in the 800s. MacIntyre, in his book, Whose Justice? Which Rationality? Says on page 14, use of the word decay presupposed that the universe had a single fundamental order, an order structuring both nature and society, so that the distinction which we mark by contrasting the natural and social cannot as yet be expressed. To be dikaios is to conduct one's actions and affairs in accordance with this order. It is over this order that Zeus, the father of gods and human beings, presides, and it is over particular communities within this order that kings preside, dispensing, if they are just, the justice that Zeus has entrusted to them. A particular decay is straight if it accords with what Themis requires, crooked if it departs from it. Themis is what is ordered, what is laid down as the ordering of things and people. A king judges straightly when he judges in accordance with the Themistes, the ordinances given by Zeus. Kingship, divine governance, and cosmic order are inseparable notions. The words decay and Themis are nouns derived from two of the most basic verbs in the Greek language. Decay from the root of de pneumi, I show or I indicate. Themis from that of titheme, laid down. Both Zeus and those kings to whose rule Zeus has entrusted the Themistes enforce decay by punishing those who violate it. If therefore the subject of king is wronged, it is to the king that he should appeal for right judgment in his favor, and so also with Zeus. Zeus protects especially those whose place in the established order is unclear or threatened, the stranger and the suppliant. The order over which Zeus and human kings reign is one structured in terms of hierarchically ordered social rules. To know what is required of you is to know what your place is within that structure and to do what your role requires. To deprive another of what is due to someone occupying his role, or to usurp the role of another, is not only to violate decay, it is to infringe upon the time, the honor of the other. Now there's a lot there, but one thing to note, for instance, is that when the king is supposed to protect the decay, basically he does so by punishing those who have violated the Themistes. He enforces decay by punishing people who violated that order. And first of all, we see that when in book 2, when Odysseus takes on the role of king, and he stands in for Agamemnon in that great scene where he rallies the troops to actually stand and fight after Agamemnon has played a little trick on them to see what their morale is. And one fellow in particular says, "Yeah, let's go and let's run away," And Odysseus grabs a scepter and pounds him in the back, and beats him down because this guy's a violator of DK. So it's obvious that that's what the king, and the role of Odysseus in book 2, that's what the king does, is he punishes those who violate DK. But right away we've got something of a problem in the epic, because the king Agamemnon is not maintaining DK. He's actually violating it when he takes the slave girl of Achilles. Well, it's in Achilles' mind, that's the way it is. And Achilles, his first reaction is wrath. His wrath is fueled by that violation that Agamemnon has done. That's why he says of Agamemnon, "You're a king who devours his subjects. You are an unjust king, essentially." But it's worse than that, because the gods don't do anything to punish Agamemnon. They don't stop him. They don't send down a messenger to kill Agamemnon at all. As a matter of fact, they're the ones who kind of prompted Agamemnon to do this, because Apollo had sent the disease among the troops, and Agamemnon, in order to appease Apollo, had given his own girl, and then he took Achilles' girl because Achilles snotted off to him. And we read it as being Achilles being noble, but in a way, it's very bold of this young guy to say to Agamemnon, "Just give up your girl, give up your goods. What's the big deal? Stop clinging." And Agamemnon punishes him and shows him, "Well, it is a big deal. I'll take away your girl. You see how you feel." So the gods have sort of prompted the very injustice that Achilles now is reacting to. And then they don't punish the doer of the injustice, Agamemnon. So that's kind of a problem. It's I think the beginning of the critique that Homer's making on the gods. But it's even worse than that too. See, because the rage that Achilles feels against Agamemnon is very justified in his own mind. Yes, he's being juvenile and petty, it seems like, but there is a reason for it. Things are the way they're supposed to be. There is a certain order to the universe, right? The bugs pick the food, and the bugs eat the food, and the grasshoppers leave, right? There's a themis to the universe, that which is ordained, what is laid down. And who lays down that order? Well, it's Zeus himself. Zeus lays down the themis. So really, when we see Agamemnon stealing the girl of Achilles and violating themis, and then not being punished for it himself, aren't we seeing something in the nature of the gods being unjust? That the whole order of the universe is disrupted here. Not just the fact that Achilles is hurt and wounded and dishonored in front of everybody else, although that's part of it. It's that the nature of the very universe is disrupted, and I think that's a large portion of why Achilles is so pissed off. He is operating in a world where good warriors, ariste, deserve time, honors, for being good at what they do, for being agathos. And that's the way it's always been, right? The man who is strong and powerful gets the reward. Well, now you've got a stronger and powerfuler man in Agamemnon who takes the reward of Achilles. And what does Achilles do? Well, the only response he can possibly have is violence. But then Athena comes down and grabs his hair and stops him like a young colt. Stop! Don't do this. This is a bad idea, right? Don't kill this guy. And so the gods, involving themselves in the almost natural response to the disorder of the universe, they involve themselves in order to stop somebody from responding violently, naturally, to the disorder of the violation of the universe that they laid down in the first place. It's really rather a sticky situation, and I think that Achilles, in some ways, he's so young that he can't have an adequate response to any of that. He can't find in himself a way to respond with words well, and he can't find a way to just let it go. And so he feels terribly torn by this, and I think that's why he enters into this violent oath against Agamemnon, which we can see certainly as a young kid saying, "I'm taking my ball, I'm going home, and I'm not playing with you guys anymore." And to some extent, it is that. But also, it is, I think, it is the shocked response of somebody who's, for the first time, witnessing the world as an unjust place. When you grow up and you're young and strong and thin and muscled out and everything's going your way, and so far you've gotten all the awards, you've gotten everything that is right and proper for a good-looking young guy, and boy, the world's a great place. It sure is swell. But then there's a moment when you come up against that wall where suddenly, wait a minute, this is not right, or that is not right. And this overwhelming sense of maybe the world itself is not right. Maybe the world itself is an unjust place. That's what begins to dawn on Achilles. That's what I think, fuels his anger at the first part. It isn't yet expressed that way. It's not expressed that way until later on when he actually meets with the emissary from Agamemnon, who come to try and plead with him to come back to the war. But it is still that in its kernel, in its nascent form. He is reacting in the only way he knows how, which is by violence, to what he perceives as a really unjust world. The world just kind of sucks. The world is just kind of an unjust place. People die. Good people die. Babies get cancer. People get swept away by tornadoes and by tidal waves. The strong seem to triumph, and the wicked seem to triumph, and the just man gets ground down into the dirt. That's not a really just world. And to realize that for the first time in your life, especially when all your life has been one party after another, one success after another, that's a hard thing. How do you find words to even react to that? You splutter and you yell and you point fingers, you stamp your feet, you throw the staff to the ground, but the world still sucks, right? People still get butchered. Children still get violated. Laws still get broken. Politicians are still lining their own pockets. So what do? You go off to your tent and you sulk. Yeah, that'll show them. Now the world will be a just place. Well, when the emissary comes to Achilles, he expresses this because he's had time to think. He expresses this sense of injustice, I think, very eloquently. He says to Odysseus, who gives this really great opportunity to come back to the battle, triple the amount of goods that he had lost. And Achilles says, no, I'm not going to be tempted back to battle by that man, that unjust man. Why should I struggle for any honor at all? The same fate waits the coward and the brave, the kakos and the agathos. Both go down to the house of death. And here I am, like a mother bird, rushing morsels to her starveling young. All day long it is labor for her, but starvation wages for herself. That's what I feel like. That's what the acquisition of justice, that's what the attempt to maintain decay in the world is like. If all the world is about is gaining time, gaining honors, if it's all about success, then it's a starvation game. Because no one succeeds. The world is an unjust place. Terribly unjust. And I'm not going to go back into it, Achilles says. But then he's drawn back into it when his friend Patroclus goes in. And Patroclus is a man that Achilles not only loves as a brother, but I think Achilles sees in Patroclus all the good and noble and honorable things that he himself strives for. Patroclus is almost like Achilles' better self. And Patroclus goes into battle out of love and pity for the Achaeans, and then gets killed, and killed horribly. And nobody stops it. No god comes down to stop it. In fact, gods participate. Hermes and Apollo participate in the death of Patroclus. And Achilles, seeing this, I think the rage is no longer limited to Agamemnon. It becomes a rage against the entire universe. The universe is an unjust place. And no words can describe the anger at that injustice. The gods that rule over us are unjust gods. The God that created this world is a God that instills cancer in children. It's the God that makes women attacked and molested by men. He is the God who causes bad men to prosper and good men to suffer. He is the God who causes the tidal wave that envelops people who have done nothing wrong. He is the God who destroys things by fire. He is the God who allows the asteroid eventually to hit the world. And that is an unjust thing. And the world itself being so an unjust place, all I can do is to rage against it. Achilles said, all I can do is to rage against it. Because I participate in that injustice. And that's a startling thing to me. He says, I should have died, not that man, not Patroclus. I should have died. Here I sit by the black ships, a useless dead weight upon the good green earth. And yes, it's a recognition of his own worthlessness. And yes, we compare it to his earlier statement that he's the best of the Achilles. But it's also, I think, a recognition at that point of his own participation in the injustice of the world, that he is polluted like everything else in the world, polluted. And so why not become a monster? Why not become a demon? And he does, and he goes and he slaughters Trojans like fish, until the river itself is choked with bodies and blood and rises up against him. He fights the river. He's that angry. He fights against the river god. And there's one scene where a young Trojan whom Achilles had released earlier is caught in this slaughter that Achilles is raging upon the Trojans. And he begs Achilles, please release me for the love of that young man Patroclus whom you love. Achilles said, no, at one point I was tempted to release Trojans. I was favorable to it. But now look you, that young man there, Patroclus, lies dead. He's a far, far greater man than me or you. And he's dead. And why do you think you're going to get away? And he stabs the guy to the horrible, cold anger that he has. And that's the kind of rage that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the rage of the total injustice of the